Good morning. Good morning, Crossroads Nation. My name is Skip Nelson. I'm a financial advisor with Thrivent Financial, and I'm thrilled to welcome you here this morning for a great morning of information and just support for you in your job transition. So if you haven't been here before, you picked a great morning to start. I'm going to go through a couple things that we have to offer for you and kind of what the morning holds. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up the slide here. So first off, the morning is going to start with just a few things that I'll go over about the day and what we've got, and even something special for those of you that showed up today. There's a gift. Yes, and I'll tell you how you're going to get it. Pretty cool. Then we've got Brian Bach, who's going to be talking about your career faith. He's a 25-year recruiter, got great perspective, and got a message for us. Then the man, the legend, George Murray, the author of Hired, is going to be talking about 7 tips for successful networking, probably the most important element of job transition, because 80% of jobs are garnered by networking. So we'll talk about that. And at the end, I will share some of the specific resources that Crossroads has for you to help you in your job transition. There's a lot of them. And so I'll go through things that are there to help and support you in your journey. But I would like to start with a short devotional. We believe in the power of prayer, and that God has a plan for all of us. And I know in my own job transition, I thought sometimes, gee, it'd be nice to get the memo as to what the plan was. But we don't always get that. But God is in control. And I know sometimes in my job transition, I was just tired. I was tired of not getting response, tired of trying to find connections at companies I wanted, tired of just the process, and it was just exhausting. And I felt kind of weird being tired when I wasn't working, right? But it is tired, and it's okay even if we lose our temper or even lose our faith occasionally. That's not unusual. It can be a very trying time in job transition. But one of my favorite books is called "Why Did I Lose My Job If God Loves Me?" And I'm just looking to that book, and it talks really about that. And it says something that I thought was quite good. And it said, referencing Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." So the process of job transition is hard and tiring. But again, you're not alone. God has got this. And a lot of people have found that if I talk to people that I coach about writing down the things in life that you're happy about and that you are blessings. And I would always start my day reviewing that list to get on the right foot and positive. But there's also something to be said for writing down the things that burden you, that you feel burdened by, and not to dwell on, but to go through each of those items and turn them over to God. Give them to God. He has said in Matthew that he will take those from you, and it is not your burden to bear completely. God is there too. So take some of those things off your shoulders and give them to God. And so it's, you're not taking, as it says in here, you're just taking a rest from the battle. You're not taking a rest from life. And use the break to sharpen your sword, to get back in the battle. Being here this morning, stuff you're going to learn from George and others is sharpening the sword. And Winston Churchill himself said, never give in, never give in, never, 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 in nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to conviction of honor and good sense. And so don't give in. And there's a lot of resources to help you along that way. Lastly, I heard about, we talk about, Brian's going to be talking about as a recruiter, about his journey and all. And it can be difficult, both from a recruiter and from those of us, folks that are looking for jobs. And it's hard to grow a business or do whatever and find the right people. And here's an interface between somebody hiring and a job applicant. The hiring person said, gee, you appear very motivated. How do you explain the 4-year gap in your resume? And the job applicant said, well, that's when I went to Yale. And the hiring manager recruiter said, wow, that's impressive. You're hired. And the job applicant said, thanks, I really need this job. So the process can be a little challenging on both sides, right? And we need to make sure that we are clear in not only our mission, but also clear in what we're looking for, and that we have a great fit on both sides. So I'd like to introduce Brian. And as I mentioned, Brian has a 25-year career in recruiting and all. And he will share some of that wisdom that he has from that career, and some motivation for you in your own job search. So Brian, good morning.
Hi, Skip. Thank you. So just to get started, I have to say that neither did I go to Yale, and I am not just getting out of jail, despite I might look like I just got out of jail, but I didn't either. So hopefully we're all good. And as I start these conversations, I always want to let people know, obviously 25 years of recruiting, over 1,000 people interviewed, you start to observe behaviors. And we talk here at Crossroads about faith, and does it matter? Is there a practical application to faith in a job search? And the answer is unequivocally yes. And I'm going to go through how that plays out for people in a job search and what happens. And I think most unemployed people feel the anxiety, feel in some cases the desperation of needing that job, needing to work. And out of that anxiety comes behaviors and patterns of behaviors that have been true for me for 25 years of observing them. And those patterns are derailers for a lot of job seekers. So I want you to know what those patterns are. I want you to know the anecdote to those patterns, which really is a resting in our faith. But we'll talk about how that resting actually plays out to make it practical, so it doesn't feel like an abstraction to you. First of all, unemployed candidates that tell me they're not getting jobs because they're unemployed is not true. I've never evaluated a candidate that's unemployed in a different way that I've evaluated a candidate that's coming from a job. There is some psychology in our human experience that says, yes, I'm going to go get somebody from somebody else. That might be true, but that plays very little role in whether or not we actually want to give somebody an offer. It's way beyond that. So I want you to let go of that idea that your being unemployed is somehow an inhibition to getting a job, because it's just not true. One of the things that unemployed candidates invariably do is in their anxiety, they want to prove to you that they're perfect for a job. So they sort of want to cling to this idea that I have to sell to you or prove my worthiness. And it's a failed proposition always. So I'm going to draw back, and I want to talk about some of the great theological virtues that are the antidote to anxiety and to performance in an interview. I want it to become more human. And those virtues, the great theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, give us that formula to make it real. And again, wanting to go back to why people don't succeed, it's in that anxiety of trying to prove something to me. Does not feel like, I always liken it to dating. If you want to prove to that dating interest you have that you're perfect for them, that really does not work in a date. I'm a 4.0 student, I'm the quarterback of the team, or I'm the this, I'm the that. That's unattractive. And so we want to move away from that sense that you have to do that. You don't have to do that. That's not what people care about. So the first virtue I want to talk about is hope. And if we look at the definition of hope, I'll read it to you. I have it up here on my screen. It's being a combination of the desire for something and the expectation of receiving it. So if we have a desire and expectation, what happens out of desire and expectation? And I use the movie *Shawshank Redemption* often because in that movie, it is a movie profoundly about hope. And in that movie, the two characters in prison, one has this desire and expectation to be free, and the other, that's Andy Dufresne, and the other, Ellis Redding, has let go of all ideas of hope. There's no place for hope in here, Red tells Andy. And Andy's trying to encourage him, no, hope is a great thing, maybe one of the greatest things that we have, and good things never die. But what happens is the person that has hope versus the person that doesn't is on display in that movie. The person with hope picks at a wall for 20 years until there's a hole big enough for him to set himself free. That expectation and desire for freedom created a behavior in Andy Dufresne that was never displayed in Red. In fact, Red's behavior was the opposite. He derailed himself. He sat before the parole board and he gave them nothing until the end of the movie when he saw Andy was set free by his hope. Red's disposition changed at the end of that movie. And when he sat before the parole board, his behavior was different. And what he told that parole board set him free. He had a belief, or he had an expectation, a desire, and then not only did he have the desire, but then the expectation that he would be set free. And that created that moment in front of the parole board that set him free. So hope drives this behavior. So have this desire for a job. I know you probably got that. You're here in this conversation this morning, but then take that desire to the next level and have an expectation that that job is there for you. So, and let that drive your behavior. I love that Skip sort of talks about starting your day with some reflection to put yourself in the right mindset. I've interviewed enough unemployed people, and they can. It's probably more rare than you would think, but they do at times come across as defeated, as woe is me. And again, that disposition, and maybe excuses come out of that. Well, yeah, it's because I'm old, or because I'm this, or because I'm that. And that's really never going to be a good disposition to have in a job search, obviously. So I also want to move into the next theological virtue very quickly here, and that is faith. Faith, and I want to distinguish faith from belief. And belief being sort of a clinging to something. We cling to faith, or to belief, like we believe something to be true. Maybe it's a mathematical formula and we cling to that truth. And that's okay. That's what belief is. But faith is different than that. Faith is a letting go versus a clinging to. That candidate that shows up at an interview and wants to prove to me something is proving something. That's a belief. They're driving at a belief, this clinging, where a letting go is the disposition that I want you to have. And that's faith. That's where faith, we let go. Faith will drive a different behavior. Faith is in letting go of who we are. We're okay with sharing who we are, our struggles, and what's happened in our professional lives. And I want you to be comfortable in letting go. Just, you are who you are. Let people get to know who you are, and be human. Get to know who they are in relation to the job at hand. So I like to share with candidates, how do we get to know the who? Because that's the only thing that at the end of the day matters. If 2% of the candidates that I meet with are infinitely more attractive than the other 98%, which is the number, by the way, it's what does that 2% do? And that 2%, I say in one breath, they're very authentic. They're very comfortable in their skin. And it feels like they sort of let go of all these preconceived notions of what they have to do to win the job. They're free. They have completely let go. Whether that's driven by their faith or not, it does not matter. That faith should tell us we just are who we are, and we have to be comfortable in that. But how do human beings, as a recruiter, one of the gifts, and it took me 10 years to figure out that I have this profound position in the world that is a blessing to me. For 10 years, I would get bored in interviews. I would drift in and out of the conversation. I wasn't always 100% present. And it dawned on me one day that one of the great things that I have been privy to, and that is getting into the lives of human beings, to seeing who they are, to seeing that if we're made in the image and likeness of God, I got to discover that. How is this person like God? And I would seek that by seeking who they were, not just what they did, which was the first 10 years of my recruiting career. What do you do? Does it align with what my clients need? That was uninspiring. But what became very inspiring was now I get to connect to this person as an image or an icon of God, made in the image and likeness of God. And when I started seeking that in candidates, I started to see who that real person was. And here's the challenge. Most interviewers won't get to that conclusion. They will seek sort of, what have you done? Does it align with what we're doing? And they won't necessarily drive at the who. They will rest more in the what, and then hopefully personalities seem to align and we get along great and they've done great things. And so therefore maybe we'll hire them. If you know how to take it deeper and get them to the who, it's always infinitely inspirational to see somebody for who they are. Hard to deliver, maybe, but here's a simple tip. To get beyond just the what you've done, share with them how you did it. How did you achieve what you achieved in your career? Why did you make decisions that you made? Because ultimately what that does over the system of a whole lot of questions in the interview process, and you're sharing little anecdotes about how or why, you start to fill in the puzzle much more clearly about who you are. And that's the winning formula. To do that, you sort of have to let go of these preconceived notions that you have to win the interview, that you have to perform a certain way, sell yourself, prove that you're the right person. No, let it go. Have this faith that you are who you were constructed to be. The gifts you have were given to you, and your job is to share them. I did a webinar, and I'm just going to end with this quick anecdote. I did a webinar with the now famous 𝙂𝙚 𝙤𝙪, who rescued Best Buy and turned Best Buy around. And he's got a lot of, he's written a book. And so there's a lot of very popular in the business world today. And in that webinar with him, the first thing he did to the audience was ask them, why do you work? And he's driving at a theological truth. And that is that we are put on this planet to work. Before the fall of Adam and Eve, they were put in the garden to tend the garden, to till the soil. Why did God give us work? Did God need us to work? No, God needs nothing from us. He did it for us. And the greatest icon of the final virtue is this, if you can see that. That is the icon of love. A man pinned to a tree, nailed to a tree. Why is that the icon of love? That is a complete giving away of yourself for others. 𝙂𝙀's question really evokes that idea. How do we give ourselves away? We've been given gifts and talents, and how do we share those with the world? I don't care if you go change jobs, change careers, go into something different. You can still use the gifts you have to give those away. That is love, giving the talents that we have away to others. And that is a mimicking of that greatest icon that we see in the Christian world, a man pinned to a tree, not for his sake, but for ours. He gave himself completely away. That is the point of the crucifixion. And we know it's true because he rose. So the combination of him doing that and then rising proves giving ourselves away freely is precisely why 𝙂𝙀 asked the question, why do we work? It's good for us to give ourselves away. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Skip and let George do his magical stuff for the rest of the time that we have here, and hopefully you all benefit from this conversation.
Amen. That was a fantastic message. Thank you so much, Brian. Really, really appreciate it. Wow, that hit on a lot of fronts. Wow, that was awesome. Well, now before we get to our keynote speaker, the man that many of you know, I mentioned this morning that we have a gift for you, and it's true. And all you have to do is go to info@mncrossroads.com, because we need your street address. And so some folks signed up, provided their street address, but if you signed up prior to that and did not provide your street address, please go to info@mncrossroads.com and give us your street address, and we will not stalk you, promise, but we will be sending you a free gift, and it's something really cool. And so make sure you get your address there so we can get you that gift. But next, as I mentioned, the gentleman that is the author of this book, Hired, which is a fantastic book. It's a must read, in my opinion, in your job transition. So make sure you pick up a copy. But George Murray really needs no introduction. No, I guess he probably needs some bit of an introduction. I'm sure you all know him. You've seen him around, heard of the book probably, but he has got a ton of experience in the job transition space, and going through his own job transition, where he wrote a book about it. And I think it's probably the best book that really summarizes the whole process. And George really hammers on one of the biggest issues in job transition, which is networking. And he's really going to focus on that here this morning. There's really nobody to hear from better in that light, and we're so lucky to have him. So it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. George Murray. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Skip. And wow, I'm really in awe with that introduction. I appreciate that. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to tell Brian, what a great message. That was really a great message, especially hit me during my first career transition, having and leaning on faith and focusing on the things that I had versus the things that I don't have. And that's really a tough sell to yourself, especially when you don't have any finances coming in. And then I also want to thank you, Skip. I want to say thanks to Harry, as well as Minnesota Crossroads, for having me again. And just want to kind of go over, before we jump into the tips, why do we network? So first, for me, it's, we're not getting any younger. And actually a good friend who's actually been a speaker, I think, on Minnesota Crossroads, Greg Rye, which most of you know, told me early on in my first career transition, George, you need to turn around and do a lot more networking. He says you're not getting any younger. A lot of your friends may have been moving away or health reasons. So your circle of influence is slowly deteriorating if you're not working on networking. And the second part of it is 70% of the jobs are never posted. And I can tell you, in my last transition in April, out of the 7 jobs I was going through interviewing processes with, 6 were not ever posted. So you need to be doing the networking in order to get the ideal opportunity that may never be even posted out there. And as most people do remember, Zig Ziglar, which is a master author as well as master salesman, said, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help others get what they want. So we got 67 slides. No, we actually got a few less than that. But here's the agenda. We want to talk about defining networking, what it is, what it isn't. Talk about an introvert versus an extrovert. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that and helped that. Ideally, or excuse me, maybe to a shock to a lot of people, is back in 2016 when I was first in career transition, I was a very much introverted person. The last thing I wanted to do was sit down and talk to somebody that I had never met before, talk about myself, talk about my aspirations and so forth. And we talk about, does it really matter? Preparing your network and pipeline, target industries, targets that I'm sure that Skip and Harry have talked about in previous, but how to go about that? And then value proposition, position as well as worth, and then knowing your ask and helping others, which is critical. And I can tell you, when people are first in networking, this is one of the few things that is so critical that people really don't clarify in their first meeting. And then the follow-up and top of mind, people, you meet people, right? Their lives go on. It's not the fact that they are looking to forget you. It's just that life gets busy. And so how do you keep top of mind? And then finally, we would close with creating a personal board of advisors. So, and again, I encourage anybody who has questions throughout the process, interrupt and ask the questions. And I ask Harry to kind of read them off, and I'll try to answer as many as possible. So what is networking? Networking is not meeting people and just getting something from them. Especially, one of the things I talk about is salespeople. How many people have reached out to you? As soon as they network with you, they're starting to sell you something. That's what not networking is. Networking is not just building a database of people and just taking from them. Well, while building a database is a great idea, networking isn't passive. No one is going to show up at your door and ask for you to be a part of their community. And it's not passive, and it's not going to come to you. You've got to go out there. It's got to be heavy lifting. I can tell you, a lot of times I meet a lot of folks that they just don't feel comfortable. And it's like, well, you really got to put yourself out there. And it's definitely not spamming. One of the things I use is that you go to a network event and you know that there's going to be 50 people there, and your instinct is I'm going to turn around and grab 50 cards, right? As opposed to what networking is really just developing strategic relationships with the critical few people and building on that as you go. Again, so what is networking? If we know what it isn't, it's mutual give and take, right? You need to try to understand people's given interests in others. Really, when you get to a first meeting, you want to try to understand that person, what's their needs and so forth. Again, people definitely want to help people that are willing to help them, right? So interestingly enough, you think, hey, I don't have anything to give when I'm in career transition, but yet you do. You've known a lot of people, you can help a lot of people in, their positions that they might be open, especially right now with currently most companies always looking for some type of skill. A lot of people, you can help that person, maybe help them identify a critical person and not be able to turn around and pay all the fees, right? That's a way to give back. It's courtesy is key to reaching out. One tip is to meet a person's first base on the fact that you will like them or like the organization. You want to make sure that you help others first. It's not a sales pitch. And I can tell you what's frustrating for me is that probably 10% of the time people reach out, it's literally right after the introduction is that they want to sell you something or they want something from you. It's like, well, you really need to develop a relationship. And I'll give you an example. Early in my first career transition, a gentleman I met just north of the cities, we sat down and I found out just in our initial 20-minute discussion, and that's all we talked about, was his two daughters had gone through swim class and got scholarships into college. Well, my daughter was just starting off in swim, right? So we literally talked 20 minutes. Long story short, over the period of a couple of years, he and I introduced back and forth multiple executives that helped us both in our career as well as our professional and personal area. And that's kind of what it is. It's helping people, right? It's showing up with a genuine interest. I can tell you We're in a society, we're kind of in an attention deficit society, and we are also in a listening deficit. We listen to respond versus truly listening. So if you show a general interest, you take notes, you follow up with a call, which we'll talk about later, all these things can make you unique, and they're very simple to do, but yet I would say a good portion of people struggle in doing this. You want to get to know them, make a friend, right? Because again, a friend is a stronger bond. They're willing to help you even through the turbulent times. And it's definitely not going to be the initial introduction. It's going to take a couple of meetings to get to know them and understand them. And it's creating those long relationships. So the question is for the group here, and you can answer this yourself, is where do you feel you are? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Or a recent word that I wasn't really, is a little bit of both, and knowing what to use and when. So the extrovert is an outgoing, overly expressive person, right? How many people we know about that? I always reference it as the great salesperson, right? They're out there, they're killing it. They've got great network, they got a great connections, and they could be Uber networkers. You can be an Uber networker as well and connector. It just takes time, effort, and dedication. The introvert, a shy, recent person, right? Recluse, lone wolf, right? I know that we've seen a lot of those people, and I can tell you that I have found myself in that point when it was in my first career transition. But instead of jumping in the deep end of the pool first, which nobody wants to get close to the pool, you need to find a way to turn around and wade yourself in. And the ambivert, as I said before, is a little bit of both. They know when to draw back and let others speak. And they're also the ability to turn around and jump right in and help others, right? So you can be any one of these and still be successful in good networking. So introverting networking. Don't have to dive in the deep end of the pool, as I said. Most wouldn't get close enough. How many people, that's how we learned how to swim, right? Our parents grabbed us, dumped us into the pool. I think parents would go to jail now. But back then, dump you in and you basically figured out how to do a doggy paddle to the end. And that's pretty much something that an introvert will never do. They won't even get close to the pool, right? So you got to find a way to gradually ease in to the networking pool. And I tell people the easiest way is to find people that you already know, right? Could be church members, it could be colleagues that you already know, alumni, past workers, because then you feel there's an understanding, you've already have a relationship. And once they introduce you to others, you have a common connection that says, hey, you know what? How do you know Skip? You can talk about that the first 5 minutes. And that's where it becomes all that ice kind of melts. And when you have a common connection, people introduce you to a new connection, it's less stressful. It's has a common interest, and these persons whom you didn't have an introduction before, you can talk about something common, and that helps further reduce the ice when it comes to your first connections. And the last thing, always be yourself. I can tell you so many times I've met some people that, because of maybe their length of career transition, they become desperate and they try to become someone they're not. And that you can find stressful, anxiety, and it also can take energy out of you. So again, if you're an introvert, the last thing you want to do is be outside who you are, because that takes so much more work and it becomes basically frustrating in career transition, right? So it adds to the inability of wanting to connect and meet the right folks. Find a hobby that's social, as I said. That's a common discussion that you can have. And you can do this all by what we're going to talk about later, doing your homework first before your first meeting. So how do you prepare your pipeline? In my first career transition, I was open because it was all new to me. I was kind of the deer in the headlights. Look, what is this process? Why hasn't anybody ever written a book about the time that you left to the time that you land? And maybe these 5 or 12 things that I outline in the book might work for me, but then 3 other different ones might work for somebody else. But I always tell people, try them all and find works for you, right? So one of the opportunities I was able to do early on was kind of the 10, 10, and 10 process. This is where we have identified, and I think it still happens on Mondays or Tuesdays in the Star Tribune business section. They identify all the movers and the shakers, the people that recently took jobs or got promoted. It's an opportunity to reach in and congratulate them. And you know what? Old school, write a letter, handwritten, a couple of lines of saying, hey, really want to recognize your recent promotion or your recent job. And oh, by the way, you might just want to do a little bit of homework. And if they're a CFO or an accountant or whatever, you might have some skill that says, hey, I looked at their recent 10K. You might see an opportunity here as you take that new role on. Again, you're helping them first before asking for help. And I always tell people is that my process was 10 letters a day, Monday through Friday, which also did 10 calls a day and 10 meetings a day. So the process is that I would send these letters out on a Sunday night, identify 50 people, dump them all in the mail, right? Written them out, handwritten the address and everything else, sent them in. And by Wednesday, Thursday, I would get calls. People start calling me and say, hey, you know what? Great letter. Love to turn around and meet with you. And it didn't have to be more than about 400 or 500 characters in a letter. Brief letter, a couple of lines as to congratulations, and then a couple of lines of what your value proposition, which we'll talk about later. And then you end it. And then they get the calls in. And then you start scheduling your meetings. So in my first career transition, out of 13 months in my first career transition with an unemployment rate of 4.3%, I networked with over 500 folks. So that averaged about 3 or 4 a day, right? That's when you can actually physically get to the coffee shop and talk to folks. In my second career transition, I was out 5.5 months and I networked with over 750. And this process helped get my pipeline started. You want to get your name out there. You want to be able to get focused on those opportunities that might be a hiring manager or an influencer for a hiring manager. A couple other ways is to go direct. So my last position with On2, which was Rudolph before we merged and rebranded, I reached out to the CEO and cold called and just left him a message and said, hey, you know, this is George Murray, recently transitioning executive, where I left a company where we took it from 100 to 180 million in 18 months. Would love to talk to you about the opportunity and how I can help you. Click. And in 5 weeks later, I was offered a job. So again, you have to make sure that message is clear and concise, and it's got some value that says, hey, I want to know how this person did it, or he's got the ability to drive profitability and growth, and I need to talk to him. So I don't know how many people are on the call. It looks like 16, but I'm sure we've been around where people talk about elevator pitches, and I tell them, please stop that. That's till 2016. An elevator pitch goes on beyond a couple of minutes, even though it should be less. And it's all about what your history was and what you've done, not as to what you potentially could help either a hirer, manager, or an influence to that. So you want to make sure that it's clear and concise, because again, we're an attention deficit disorder country because of things like this, the cell phone. We want to make sure it's impactful. Do the homework on the night before. And when somebody asks you, George, tell me about yourself, your response is, I'm a rappel master. Much like my military career, I drop into difficult situations. I assess the group, develop a collaborative strategy, and execute that plan. My team always exceeds the bar. Do you know anybody that needs a rappel master? And I guarantee you, they'll remember you on your value proposition that way versus the whole, what I call the Charlie Brown speech, right? This is all about, George, tell me about yourself. And you start off like just about everybody else. It says, well, I'm an executive in operations. I've got 20 years experience with an MBA, wah, wah, wah. You sound just like everybody else, right? So you want to make sure that you take whatever you found in their background the night before a meeting and develop that 30-second value proposition. Because again, I think the last time I checked, our attention span's about 5 seconds and goldfishes are 6 seconds. So we have less than an attention span of a goldfish at this point. And again, it's a taste of the cake. It's not the recipe, right? Because if they know everything about you, do they ever have to call you back? Do they ever have to reach out? You want to make sure it's just enough that says, hey, I really need to talk to this person and find out how they did that or how they can do it for me or us. Second part of your first meeting is always clearly defining your ask. And more importantly, don't ever forget at the end, how can you help them? That's a critical question because very few people do ask that. And that will also, simple thing that has a big impact that says, oh, you know what? This person is out of work, but yet they're offering help to me. That says a lot about who you are and what you can do for them. So again, you want to make sure that it's focused on a primary and a backup, just so that you can also walk away with something, right? So here's a prime example. So George, tell me, how can I help you? Well, you know what, Fred, I'm looking for a chief operating officer of a manufacturing technology company between 100 million to 300 million. And if you've done your homework the night before, you might know that this person's a private equity firm or he's a CEO. He may know those. Again, back to the earlier conversation we started off with, is that 70% of jobs are never going to be posted. So you got to be able to ask that. And I would say 5 to 10% of the time, people are like, yes, I do know somebody. But then I always followed up with a backup and said, you know, my other swim lane is focused on networking with, again, people that are influencers or hiring managers. So for me, it was CEOs and board members I'm looking to network with. Do you know anybody? Or private equity firms. Do you know anybody? Boom. And I always walked away with a couple of more contacts. And that's how you continue to build your pipeline. Just because you're in transition doesn't mean that you can't be valued for those folks. And so you need to make sure that you can help them. How can I help? Is there anybody I can refer you to? What are the types of people that you're looking to network with? Are there any opportunities that I may be able to help you fill? For example, if you're a CFO or you're an accountant, you may know somebody in the financial because, hey, I'm looking for a cost accountant. Yeah, I do know somebody. I can help you introduce them. Again, search for the role and recommendations are always a part of that. How can I help you? And know your ask. Again, a big part of your networking meetings, whether you're doing 3 a day, 7 a day, 9 a day, or whatever, you want to make sure you prepare the night before. So this is how I wrote my book with all these notes of these little books. And I'd always, my process was the night before I went on their LinkedIn. And again, if anybody, and a lot of people do know, and go into the private search mode so that no one thinks that you're just heavily stalking them, but you just want to get some, you're collecting data so that you can make sure that your networking meeting is valuable and that you show that you have taken a general interest in just meeting somebody. So a part of this process is making sure you understand the person and their industries and their targets, right? Their target companies. That's part of your process, but it's also connected. So when you sit down and talk to them, you may have been introduced by somebody else, but you can find, hey, you know what? I realized that you worked for a supplier that I worked with before, and that's a common connection. That's what you're trying to do in those first 10 minutes or so, is try to find a common connection than just an introduction. Because again, it's building a bond and a relationship over a period of time that people are going to turn around and do for you and you're going to do for them. And that's all a part connecting and helping and adding value to your team or your network. You also want to make sure that whether these books, you know, my process is that I would take and I'd put their name in the left-hand corner and I would find out of all the common connections, 3 or 4, and that would be an opportunity to break the ice, saying, hey, you know what? How do you know Harry? How do you know Brian? That could turn around and instantly connect you, and then you can have a dialogue that's meaningful versus kind of like some dead air dead space. It's like, you're trying to reach for ways to make that time go by. Showing up, looking in the mirror and checking your Zoom views, all these things can help you. A lot of our networking meetings now are through Zoom. So I always tell people, make sure that you don't have things that are dating you. One of the person I was networking and I had to help him, I was coaching him. He had curtains in the background that are probably as old as my grandmother's. And I think my grandmother had them. And I literally had to help him, like, move to another area in the work or in your office space or your home space, so that it doesn't give off that, that look, right? You want to make sure it's neutral and it's not distracting. Whether you've got files in the background that are flowing over, that says a lot about you, and you don't want to make sure that you push those off. All those things we take for granted, but those are the things that give the first impression when you're sitting up and meeting people the very first time. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you listen with genuine interest, take notes, because they also can help you write a book like mine, and use a follow-up email. This is one of the things where, people giving you 20, 30 minutes of their time, right? It's valuable because it's one of the commodities you cannot make more of. So make sure that you follow up and say, hey, you know what, Skip, I really appreciate the time yesterday and talking about my finances as I was going through career transition and helping me find ways to find old 401ks that might help bridge the gap through career transition. That makes a significant impact because A, you valued them, you value your time, and you connected a common discussion that you had. And it's simple, but very few people take that extra step. And then I always say is the first meeting should be a 70-30 split. Your 30% of the time is your value proposition, your introduction, and your ask. The other 70% is truly getting to know that person, taking notes, finding ways that you can help them, because that develops a relationship. And as I said before, follow-up is key. It's one of the simple things to do, and I would say more than 40% of the folks fail to do this. Get an introduction, thank them within 24 to 36 hours. Simple thing, very few people do. Thank them with a personal email or a note, just makes it more unique and different. And then make sure that you follow up. Again, it's not a one and done process. You need to make sure over a period of time, within 3 or 4 months, you can develop a really good relationship with a new introduction. And these people will be more than willing to go the extra mile to help you listen, hear opportunities, and introduce you to other folks. And then I always tell people a way to keep top of mind is just sending an update to your individual new connections 5 to 8 weeks to say, here's my process or my progress in the last 4 to 5 weeks. And again, a couple of lines of what I'm continuing to do and what I'm looking for. Again, top of mind, because those people are out networking. 4 or 5 weeks go by, hey, I haven't heard from George. And then next week I talk to somebody that's looking for an operations executive or supply chain person. The last person they're going to think of is myself if I don't keep them up to date. So how do we keep top of mind? There's simple things that we are prompted every day that we fail to do so. So example, LinkedIn tells us every morning the people who are getting promoted, the people who are getting new jobs, and the people who are giving happy birthdays or whatever. How many people actually hit just the happy birthday sign? If you do, you're probably 70% of the folks that do it. And it doesn't make you unique and different. Again, the congratulations versus making a more of an attempt to let them know, hey, I want to recognize you on one of your best days of a promotion or a new opportunity. So again, it's birthdays, it's promotions. Use these and you can develop templates, copy and paste, send them out, change them every 3 months. These are the ways that will make you different and unique. Work anniversaries. So for example, instead of hitting the happy birthday, One of the ones that I used last year was, today you have added another candle of your knowledge and wisdom to your life. May it give you power to enlighten the whole world. On your birthday, I wish you joy and happiness. Any chance to grab 15 minutes to catch up in the next few weeks? That's the difference between the happy birthday and that unique recognition. And oh, by the way, let's have some time. Or congratulations, which I said 70% of the folks do. Or congratulations on your new role. Very happy for you. Wish you the best year ever, right? Or wishing you many years of success and innovation. Happy work anniversary. All these things, again, will make you different than everybody else just hitting the happy birthday, or the 20% that don't even recognize it. And you don't have to do this just in career transition. Do it throughout. So again, you continue to develop your network and strengthen your network as time progresses. Like and share on comments when people talk about specific things that you're passionate about, whether it's supply chain issues right now that's affecting everybody and how you may be able to help them. Or maybe they've got a finance question that they'd like to bounce off somebody. And it's a cadence. You have to make sure that you're doing it religiously. 5 to 7 weeks when in career transition, you're doing these types of things. You're updating your folks. You're letting them know, A, I recognize you, and B, I would love to catch up with you. Because again, you want to build masses of cheerleaders out in the workforce for you. And when you're employed, you want to send out an updated letter every 2 to 3 times a year, just saying, hey, here's my life, here's what's going on, a couple of lines, and oh, by the way, this is what I might be looking for, whether you're looking for an accountant or you're looking for an engineer. Would you know anybody? Again, this is a way to keep your network fresh and always growing and always engaged. These are simple things. They're on calendars of reminders for me throughout the year so that I make sure that I do this. And this is a whole process that's followed in the book. And then finally, one of the things I tell people, especially in career transition, but if you haven't realized by now, you are the CEO of You Incorporated. You work for yourself first, right? And as a CEO, they all have personal board of advisors. Now, these are people that hold you accountable. They can introduce you when things get slow on a week. And they also can turn around and be a sounding board. Hey, you know what? I've got these 2 opportunities. This one's this one, this one's this one. And they can help you navigate those things. They connect you with master networkers. And they keep your pipeline full. And again, there are 3 to 5 folks that I have met in my career transition that still to this day are part of my personal board of advisors. They listen to you, and as I said, they give you advice. And anybody who's ever read another great book, it's The True North by Bill George. He talks about his own personal board of advisors that's helped him throughout his personal and professional life. And as you can see, this was my personal board of advisors. I was very fortunate enough to have Ann Pryor on my board, still do. Lisa Fraga, who is basically kind of the sister that passed away early on in my life. She tells it like it is. She doesn't hold back, and she knows it. Alan McClellan is the CEO of Sage Glass. He's a gentleman that I cold called in my career transition, and actually wrote, if you open the book to the first page, he wrote the first introduction and overview of our first meeting. Jenny Jeffords, I consider my energy coach. There were times when you kind of get that letter, thanks but no thanks, on a Friday. Who do you turn to? Who's going to lift your spirits up and be able to prepare for you for the next week? And that was her. And then of course, Ryan Carlson helped me with a lot of financial decisions in my transition. But again, you also want to make sure that you're helping that personal board thrive, right? So it's kind of a hand washing effort. They help you, you help them. So anybody who's interested in the book, you can turn around and go to Kirkhouse Publishing and hit the checkout code. Hired, all in caps, hired 15% off to get that. All I ask is a simple Amazon review. And then if you're also interested, on the first and third Saturdays of every month, Phil and I have kind of a show, 8:02 a.m., sponsored by Thrivent and Skip's group. Appreciate that. We talk about a specific topic that can help you both personally and professionally in your job growth and career transition or a career pivot. And this Saturday, I think we're talking about purpose. We always have a great speaker. And so that's the 7 tips. Any questions? Well, Skip and Harry, I think that's probably the record that I've done that in that whole 7 tips, but it's a lot to take in. It's re-emphasized in the book, and it can help people land jobs faster, even last opportunities faster. Even if you're in a current role you love, you might be looking for a board position, or you might be looking for a side hustle or whatever. Networking is where it's at.
So true, George. And gosh, nobody knows better. You not only you talk the talk, but you walk the walk. You've done it. And again, I couldn't encourage people more. Pick up the book Hired, and the coffee with George and Phil on Saturday, every other Saturday. Great topics. It's free. A nice way to start the day. Grab a little cup of coffee, and just great resources. And thanks so much, George, for all you do through your book and just your giving of your time. People in job transition are helped through a difficult time and made easier because of you. So really do appreciate it.
No, thank you. And I'm actually working on my second book. It's called Engage. I'm about 50%. This is actually for leaders and businesses today because there's so much turnover. It's Engage. It's called Igniting a Workforce, keeping your top talent and increasing profitability. And I'm about 50% away through that book as well. And hopefully to have that published by the first quarter of next year.
Man, you are now becoming a prolific author. This is impressive. That you're right. I have enough trouble reading a book. You're writing them. That's impressive. So
not without help. You know, I've got great editors, and I mean, you definitely don't want to see the first draft of Hired. It was a train wreck.
Well, the finished product certainly isn't, and I love that, and I can't wait to see your next book. But again, thank you so much, George, and I'm sure we will chat soon.
Well, thank you. If there's any
Absolutely.
questions, people can reach out to me directly. More than willing to help them out.
Excellent. Well, certainly do appreciate that, and I will.
Sorry, Skip, you were accidentally muted. You need to unmute.
Oh, how's that? That's probably better. Thank you. I mentioned a gift earlier, and make sure that you get yours. And so to do that, we need to have your street address at MN or info@mncrossroads.com. info@mncrossroads.com. And we will send that out to you. And but the second gift we have for you is resources. And that is something that I will go over now, because as I mentioned, job transition is tough, and but you're not alone. And there's a lot of people through Minnesota Crossroads that will help you in your journey. And let me go through some of the very specific resources that Minnesota Crossroads has for you in your job search. We are affiliated with 3 different churches, the main one obviously being Grace Church in Eden Prairie, but also through Woodbury Lutheran in Woodbury and North Heights Lutheran in Arden Hills. And so if don't hesitate to reach out to any of those. All of it right now is going to be virtual and based out of the Eden Prairie Church Crossroads group. But the main thing that you want to go to is mncrossroads.com, because that is where all the resources are for Minnesota Crossroads. And there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of ongoing information, ongoing events, resources, jobs specifically. People are sending in jobs. So That should be on your speed dial on your phone. Is there a speed dial on our computer? There isn't. There should be. That should be something that you're checking consistently, because it's a lot of really, really good information. You want to make sure that you see it. On a weekly basis, there is networking. And as George so aptly pointed out, it's one of the most important elements of finding a job is ongoing networking. And we have that for you here shortly from 9 to 11 every Thursday. If you go onto that site, MN Crossroads, you can sign up for our Networking with Grace group, run by the two Wes's, Wes Roper and Wes Tang, do a phenomenal job. I think it's one of the best networking groups in the Twin City area for job transition. And so if you're not attending that group, you should be. You will make contacts, you will get contacts at your targeted companies. So don't miss that. And there's still time. You can even sign up yet today. We also have one-on-one coaching. So if you want some help with your resume or kind of ferreting through job options and what do you want to do when you grow up? I know that was me. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I sold my business that I'd run for 27 years. It's like, well, now what? And so the people that can help you kind of work through the process and on a one-on-one basis. And also, we're big believers in prayer. As I referenced in my devotional, God's got this. It can be a challenging process. And a lot of times we don't know how long it's going to be, and we don't know where we're going to land or what we're going to do, but God does. And there are people that are praying for you and will pray for you. So if you have a specific ask, you have an interview coming up, or just frustration and just strength to keep going in your job interview or job transition, whatever, reach out. We will pray for you and your specific asks. We also have an 8-week class of how every element, literally, on how to find a job as quickly as possible. You get assigned to a small group, and you go through this 8-week process with that group. You kind of get to know them a little bit, network maybe, and it goes through every element of the job transition process. Again, attitude and targeted companies and negotiating and interviewing and resumes and whatever, all of it. And it goes through more on a one-on-one basis with your small group. So it's a great group, and they're adding groups. We're adding them every month. So don't hesitate to sign up and dive in. I think you'll find it very helpful. And then make sure you join the LinkedIn group for Minnesota Crossroads, MN Crossroads Career Network. Again, it's a really good ongoing community of people that you can connect with, and a lot of alumni. And we've got, I don't know, 1,500, couple thousand, I don't even know, a lot of people that have been through this program over the many years that it's been going. And gosh, if you want to network with somebody who's been through job transition, because they know the battle, they know it's tough, and I've found that they are particularly helpful and willing to help, to really help. So it's a great way to connect with alumni and all that at the LinkedIn group from MN Crossroads. The other thing, this is super cool, and this is relatively recent, that we have now got the presentations like the one you just heard from George. We've got great speakers that are willing to speak to our Crossroads group. And we now have many of the presentations on YouTube. So if you missed part of George's today, or you've missed some in the past, go on to our YouTube channel and look. There's an entire listing of amazing speakers and topics that I guarantee will help you in your job transition. But just go through and find ones that would be particularly interesting to you, and you can watch them whenever is convenient for you. But great resource. Additional resources, and as I mentioned, I'm with Thrivent Financial, and we have partnered with Minnesota Crossroads for years and are thrilled. We are such big believers in what Harry does and all the people through Minnesota Crossroads. Just great service they provide to the job transition space. And so we like to help out any way that we can. And one of the ways that I do is we do workshops every Tuesday, the first 3 Tuesdays of the month, on different financial issues in job transition. We have one on retirement planning. and one on just kind of a market update. A lot of turbulence going on in the market. If you want to kind of find out what's going on, are we projecting coming up with all this turbulence? That's what we talk about. So again, you can go to the MN Crossroads site and sign up for those webinars. Love to have you, and think you might find them helpful in your job transition space. As I mentioned, there are many, many volunteers that Harry has put together, a great team of people that are all volunteers and are all here to help you. And so the people that you see in front of you are praying for you. They are helping on the 8-week classes. They are giving seminars. They are here as resources for you. And so don't hesitate to reach out and utilize. As I mentioned, the three, just check out any of these three churches. Are great folks and have great resources themselves on the spiritual side too, which we've talked about is incredibly important in life, but certainly in job transition. So that is a little bit about what MN Crossroads has for you. Great resources. Make sure you reach out. Again, make sure for your gift, and how fun you'll be able to run to the mailbox and see, has the gift come yet? That you go to info at mncrossroads.com, info at mncrossroads.com, and put in your street address, and we will get that off to you, and we know you'll enjoy it. So blessings. Hope you found this today special and helpful. Our next event is going to be on Thursday morning at 7:30, November 18th. And Rich Braden is going to be talking about organizing your job search. I know in my job search, I was all over the place and not very organized. And so if you need some help in kind of getting things put together in more of a orderly fashion and having kind of a plan of attack for your job search, Rich knows it well. He's a vast knowledge in this area. So don't miss that. You can sign up again on MN Crossroads for November 18th at 7:30 a.m. Rich Braden, organizing your job search. So make sure you do that. Great having you here, everybody through Crossroads Nation. We look forward to seeing you again, and make it a blessed day.